Okay. All right, everyone. It looks like we're about ready to get started. So I just want to remind everyone before we officially start that we are recording this call. So if you do not want to be on camera, you can go ahead and turn off the camera by clicking the camera button right next to your red leave button in the corner of your screen. That will take you off of camera. Otherwise, you will be in the recording for today's event. I also ask that if you are not actively talking, if you can remember to keep yourself muted so that we don't have any disruptions during the presentation. And I also want to recommend that if you have a question but don't want to ask it or interrupt, you can always either raise your hand by clicking on the little raise hand button, which is next to the chat feature, or you can always type your question in the chat box as we go through the presentation. Okay. Looks like we've got a good critical mass here this morning, so I'm going to go ahead and start introductions. We have, okay, great. Okay, everyone, good morning. My name is Christine Anderson. I am the Public Affairs and Communications Manager for the Texas Real Estate Commission. Thanks for joining us for our, I think, third Coffee with the Commission. We started these events back in December of last year to start talking about things that happened at the commission meeting. And we are so fortunate that our chair, Scott Kesner, and Chelsea Buchholtz, our executive director, are here joining us this morning to talk and go over some hot topics as well as the rule proposals from the May meeting and answer your questions. This is supposed to be fairly informal. So if you have a question, please feel free again to raise your hand or put it in the chat box, or you can always just take yourself off mute and say, excuse me, we're always open for that. We encourage conversation and discussion during these events. I will be recording this and then resharing it on our social media outlets. So if somebody was unable to attend this morning, please know that this video will be available for somebody later on. Okay, and Chelsea and Scott, okay, everyone's off mute. Good morning, you guys.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea and Scott for today. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
You bet. Thank you for the invite, and I appreciate everybody joining in. We've got a brief PowerPoint we're going to run over, but we will have plenty of time for questions and discussion. I just want to thank y'all for joining. I want to thank Christine for putting it together, and I'm going to kind of let Chelsea kind of give you a roadmap of what we're doing today.
Absolutely, and it looks like Christine is in the process of sharing her screen with our PowerPoint. We can click to that next slide.
Hold on, I am sorry. For some reason, something just crashed, and I am trying to get the right presentation. You know, nothing like live for us to figure this out together.
Sure. Well, I'll go ahead and talk about just our agenda for the day. We want to our mission in having these meetings is to give you a download on what occurred at the most recent commission meeting. And so with that in mind, we had 3 new commissioners join the commission for the May meeting. And so we'll introduce those folks to you, give you an update of where we are in the selection process of broker lawyer committees. We have 2 openings there on the broker side. Give you a few highlights of what we talked about at the meeting. Oh, there's Christine's family.
That's my family. Okay, I don't know what is going on. I am so sorry.
I'll share my
screen. It worked. No, I've got it. I just the screens just went all black there. Now is that working?
That's good.
Thank you. I'm so sorry for the distraction, guys.
And then we'll address a few hot topics that just seem to be happening in the industry a lot, and then give you a little update on where we are in the legislative session. So that's the mission of the morning. We're grateful that you've joined us today. Thank you for your time. We'll try to keep this right at about an hour. Please feel free to ask questions along the way, and we'll also have some time at the end for that. This is intended to be interactive. Okay, next slide. I'm turning it over to you, Scott.
All righty. Like Chelsea said, at the last commission meeting, we had 3 new commissioners, and I want to introduce each one of those. Some of y'all probably know them. The first one is Leslie Lerner from the Houston area. She's was appointed to serve. She was chair of the Broker Responsibility Working Group. And so she brings a lot of that experience, a lot of the knowledge, and a lot of the background on what broker responsibility was looking at. Like I said, she is from Houston. She is broker owner of Leslie Lerner Properties, and we welcome her and her willingness to serve. And next we have Ben Pena. He is a public member. He has served previously on the Texas State Board of of Accountants. He was on their enforcement committee. They call it a behavioral enforcement peer review committee. And he is from the Brownsville area. He is a public member and a CPA, and we're looking forward to him not only helping with the budget process, but also enforcement. And the third new member is Mark Woodruff from the Houston area. He's been licensed a number of years. He manages a large office in Houston. He brings a lot of knowledge to the commission, not only as a practicing broker, but also the ins and outs of everyday issues with brokers, broker responsibility forms, and so forth. So we welcome those three to the commission, and we look forward to them serving with us and moving the commission forward. I know I saw Mark's name on earlier. I also saw President Commissioner Delora Wilkinson's own, and I saw former Commissioner Joanne Justice's own. And if I missed somebody, I haven't had time to run through the 70 plus people attending, but welcome to the new commissioners. And then I will turn it back over to Chelsea, and we'll talk a little bit about the broker lawyer committee.
Chelsea, you are on mute.
I've been doing this for 15 months and I still talk while muted. One day I'll learn, but maybe not. Thank you, Christine. We are in a season of selecting two individuals for open seats on the broker lawyer committee. This committee drafts and revises all of the contracts promulgated by TREC. It's a big job. We were talking earlier this week about how we think the broker lawyer committee, in terms of time commitment, is probably about the same time commitment, if not more, of our commissioners. It's a big job. It's not just a resume builder, if I could say that, but it's a working committee. It consists of 6 commission appointments within the industry, brokers, and then 6 members, 6 lawyers appointed by the state bar, and then 1 public member appointed by the governor's office. So we do have 2 open positions on the broker side right now, and we have received applications for filling those. Scott, do you want to mention where we are in that process?
Yes, we did post it on the website, and I think we announced it 2 or 3 different times. I think the last commission meeting, and also maybe even the previous coffee with the commission, we had right at 50 applicants. I will tell you, a lot of qualified applicants. What we've done on the selection committee is we have appointed 3 commissioners to review and possibly interview the applicants, and that way we can, hopefully the cream will rise to the top, which I know it will. We have Commissioner Wilkinson serving on that. Commissioner Hartgraves and myself are reviewing the 50 applicants. And like I said, we're going to continue the process, get it narrowed down, maybe do some phone interviews, one-on-one, and come up with 2 to serve on the broker lawyer. I want to emphasize what Executive Director Buchholtz said. Not only are their meetings very long, intense, usually 4 to 6 hours, they spend a lot of time between the meetings doing research, evaluating. I mean, there's a ton of time spent. And so serving on that committee is a huge, huge commitment. And I want to thank everybody that did apply. Like I said, I can't remember if it was 50 or 52 applicants, but there was a bunch of applicants, and we are currently reviewing those as we speak.
Scott, just to be sure I understand, that you're not currently accepting applicants. We're closed.
No, the applicants, I believe the cutoff was, Chelsea, you do remember the date?
I don't, but I know that it is passed. So
Yeah.
This update is really just intended to let you know where we are in the process. We see a lot of interest in this committee from across the industry, and so wanted you to be aware. We've also changed our process over the last year or two to make it a more transparent process with more. I mean, the commission has the ultimate decision on who is appointed, meaning the 9 commission members. But we've created more engagement in that process for them, so that there's a selection committee of 3 commissioners who make those recommendations to the full commission. Okay, we'll give you a few updates on the May commission meeting. This was the first time that the commission met in person since the February of 2020 meeting. So it was very exciting to be together in person. We also had a remote component so that for those who wanted to participate remotely, they could. So we will continue that process for as long as COVID remains a factor in the way that we work. We did have our annual update from the Texas Real Estate Research Center at Texas A&M, and we're really grateful for the economic and housing outlook report that they provided. In short, Dr. Jim Gaines there, the economist there, said the housing market is on fire. I know that's not a surprise to any of you. But he just spoke to sort of the uniqueness of this market, the fact that he and nobody else can really look back year over year to compare with any amount of science or certainty that this is a time that seems as if it's an outlier, and time will tell how it will shake out. I encourage you to go back and listen to what he said. I find it just very interesting to hear from them. They also, the Real Estate Research Center puts out regular newsletters and articles that provide great insight into Texas housing market that I encourage you each to go to their website and review. We were pretty light on rules this commission meeting. We had one new rule that was adopted, and this rule is something that statute requires. It's not unique to our agency, but it's basically formalizing a process for stakeholders to request a rule change, a new rule, anything of that nature. So it creates a mechanism for a member of the public to ask for a change or a new rule. So we had an informal process, and this simply formalizes that. Then there was one proposed rule that the commission voted to submit for public comment. And that is, I say one rule, it is a chunk of rules, but it's the inspector's standards of practice that the inspector committee has spent many hours reviewing and updating. So that piece of work is a large piece of work, and I encourage you to review those changes to the extent that that's of interest and applicable to you. And if you have a comment on this rule or any rule in the future, we have a new tool on our website that makes it easier to submit public comment. You don't need to email us anymore. You just simply click the submit comment button on our website. So we're excited about that new feature. The last thing, the other thing I wanted to mention before I pass it to the chair to talk about the enforcement workshop is that we're in budget season at the commission. We're on a fiscal year that begins September 1st and ends August 31st. And so this summer will be spent finalizing the budget for the commission's review in August. And so the commission did review a first draft of that at the May meeting, and that will be further refined over the summer.
All right. Thank you, Chelsea. I just want to reiterate what she said. It was the first time we've met in a long, long time in person, and it was good to see everybody. It was good to see staff and have the opportunity to thank staff and all the executive chairs and committee chairs for their service. After the commission meeting, the next morning, we met for a workshop. And we started these workshops, I'm guessing probably a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, to help the commissioners dig deeper into different parts of the commission. And one thing that I think the commissioners see a lot of finished material is on enforcements, whether it's agreed orders, suspensions, revocations, whatever. We see a lot of those, but we really didn't know deep down how the process worked. And I want to thank, the director of the Enforcement Committee, Mike Malloy, General Counsel Vanessa Burgess, and of course Executive Director Buchholtz for putting this enforcement workshop together. I think it gave all the commissioners a deeper knowledge of the entire process. And even though we don't need control of the process, that staff certainly does that. It certainly gave us a better understanding of what they look for, how they do it, and the procedures all the way from the initial complaint all the way up to the SOA hearings. And of all the things I think we've done in the last couple of years, these workshops have been extremely beneficial to the commission and also those that also log in, because those are public hearings and members of licensees and members of the public are certainly encouraged to log in. But it was a great workshop. And I think a lot of these workshops have really helped us put together, future orientation materials. So when a new commissioner joins or whatever, we can get them up to speed a whole lot quicker. So again, the workshop on enforcement was extremely beneficial and effective.
Hey, Scott, I just want to let you know that I went ahead and shared the link to the comment tool in the chat, as well as the videos from both the commission meeting and the workshop, in case anyone on the call is interested in going back and watching those.
Excellent. And I want to thank staff and especially technology and everybody for getting this online comment tool. When we had the proposed rule change for the contract, we had like 200 pages of comments, and that was still the old-fashioned email it in, mail it in, or whatever. And now with the online tool, it's really going to let the licensees and members of the public be engaged. So thank you for sharing those on the chat. And I will turn it back over to Executive Director Buchholtz.
That's thanks, Scott. Okay, hot topics. These are just a few things I wanted to mention to you in terms of things that we're getting a lot of questions on. This first one, escalation clauses, is intended to be a little bit of a teaser. We looked back, and the last time we had written an article on escalation clauses was in 2016. And so we are going to update that article and publish a new one on our website. Just gives a little bit of guidance to our license holders on that. But I wanted to mention it here because we're getting a lot of questions on it. So escalation clause, you all know this, but it's basically writing something into paragraph 11 that would allow a buyer to have some sort of advantage, like buyer will pay above appraised value, or buyer will pay X amount more than any other offer received, something like that. And so I wanted to say that writing things, if you as a license holder are writing that type of thing into paragraph 11, that's considered the unauthorized practice of law and is prohibited. Under no circumstances could you do that. Now, of course, a buyer could write that into a contract, not at your advice, but they could do that themselves. And then, of course, the buyer could also hire an attorney to draft language such as that. You as a license holder cannot hire an attorney or use a brokerage attorney for such things. It needs to be an attorney that represents the buyer. That's the short version. We will have a new article on that and possibly a live session to talk that through to answer any questions. I feel like it can get pretty complicated pretty quickly with facts, but the overall concept is exactly as I laid it out. Scott, did you want to put some meat on the bones of that?
Yeah, just first of all, thank you. That was an excellent, description of exactly what you can and can't do. We will receive offers with escalation clauses, and as a practicing broker and supervising broker, I will email the broker the article that was published in October of 16. And even though TREC is coming out with a new article, nothing has changed. It is still, not allowed in Texas. Now, Chelsea mentioned something I thought was very, very interesting. I want to recall former Chair Avis Wukash said this at a luncheon one day. Someone said, well, if my principal tells me to put that in there, I'm putting it in there. And Avis said, yes, but if TREC looks at 8 of your 10 contracts and it's there, then you're coaching the client. If they want an escalation clause, they need an attorney to do it, just like Chelsea said. And I need to reiterate, we cannot furnish clauses and addendums from a brokerage for a client. Okay, if it's an attorney, they need to pay for that. The market is crazy. Someone told me after the last crash that I've lived through every type of market. They lied to me. Even El Paso has a very, very hot market, and we just have to be real careful. I tell our agents all the time, everybody's happy till someone's unhappy. Okay, so that escalation clause is something I definitely think you need to watch out for. And it's a great article. The one in 16, I know the one coming out in the next couple of weeks will be just as good to share with your customers and clients.
I have to say it might look pretty similar, just because, as you say, nothing has changed. There's not much to improve upon it, but there's just a new need for encouraging people to pay attention to that sort of thing. Okay, how to manage multiple offers. You know all of this better than I can say, but I did want to just mention a few things that's real specific to TREC, and that is just a reminder that you must treat all parties with fairness. Our fidelity, our rule on fidelity requires that. And then also communication with your client is paramount. We were asked not too long ago in a regional meeting we had, well, do you have to negotiate if your seller receives 10 offers? Do you have to negotiate with all of those buyers? And that's really a question for the seller, right? To communicate with it. Of course, you as the agent need to communicate all offers to your client, unless you've received instructions otherwise. But how you handle those offers is up to you and the seller, or is up to the seller. So communication is key, and I would encourage you to put that in writing, just so that if there is something unusual that is instructed of you by the seller, you have the protection of that being in writing, should there be some sort of complaint. Scott, what does that look like in your world?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely seeing multiple offers, and I think Chelsea hit the nail on the head when it says treat all parties, with fairness, honesty, and fair. One thing that, when we think of multiple offers, we think of a property being listed and it getting, 10 to 12 offers. And, but you also have multiple offers for the same purchaser. Okay. You might have a purchaser that writes multiple offers on properties. What we've encountered in our office in the last, 4 to 6 weeks is different agents in this office representing clients for the same property. And I think, to go back to the fidelity, honest, and fairness, you need to be extremely careful what you say, because you might be in this office and say something, I'm writing the house up at 2805 Bob Hope, and someone else is writing it up also. And then as a supervisor or broker, you're responsible to help give advice and opinions to your agents, yet at the same time, you need to be real careful because you might have competing offers from the same brokerage. Honest and fair, I mean, that pretty much sums it up. If you are a member of the association, there's some code of ethics rules that also have to be followed as far as disclosure. But, until we get more inventory, there's going to be multiple offers. And the best way to handle that is let everybody know up front what's going on. Getting to that and the escalation clause, just kind of a best practice that we did a couple weeks ago. Y'all might find this hard to believe, but I was actually showing properties about 3 weeks ago because my wife was out of town and she had a client coming in from Vermont. And before putting her in the car to go show houses, I ran a snapshot of what she was looking for in the neighborhood. And there were 52 closed properties in the last like 30 days. And 38 of those had sold at or above the list price. And so, you know, when we start talking about the hot market, I thought it was, you know, important to show her exactly what's going on, not just the rumors. And again, when she got ready to make an offer, she knew the market. I treated her honest and fair, gave her the information, and she made a very educated decision. So both those kind of tied together. It's the communications. I think Chelsea hit on that. Communication with a client is the most important thing.
Hey, Scott and Chelsea, we had a question from Susie on the prior topic, and I just wanted, before we got too far away from it, on escalation. Can a seller or seller's agent stipulate in the MLS listing that they will not accept escalation clauses?
There was.
My guess. Oh,
go
you
ahead.
first.
No, go ahead.
Well, it was more of a question than anything. I'm guessing that there may be some specific local MLS rules that may control that. So it may not be the same from one to the next. I do not have an answer from the position of TREC. I think that might be a local MLS question. Scott, do you?
Yeah, there was an article, maybe even a frequently asked questions on TREC's website. We're seeing 1% earnest money, no option, boom, boom, boom. And I'll have to dig back. The frequently asked question basically said, you know, is that the seller saying this, or is the broker coaching it, or the agent coaching? And if the agent's coaching or broker's coaching, again, you're looking at unauthorized law and stuff. But there's a great frequently asked question, Christine. I will find that and I will send it to you. And I just know it was TREC's website. But
okay, I'm looking for it right now while we're chatting as well. So hopefully we'll find it here.
And I'm trying to think where I read it, but it was really great info, because we're seeing a lot of that in confidential remarks or non-public remarks. The way the agents want it structured, and is that the agent or is that the owner? And I think that's the biggest question, along with MLS rules.
Okay.
That's a great point. I also wanted to mention I threw an article in here that was published by Texas Realtors on multiple offers, and it speaks on both the buyer and the seller's side of things, and I think it may be helpful to some of you. It does speak, Scott, to exactly what you were saying, of just managing the expectation of a buyer on the front end so that they can have their best foot forward given this competitive market. Okay, lastly on our hot topics list is something you all are very well aware of, but we can't stress it enough, and that is that there was a big change that became mandatory on April 1st, and that is how an option fee is delivered. A buyer is now required to deliver that option fee to the title company, not to the seller. And the buyer must deliver the option fee to the title company within, of course, 3 days after the effective date of the contract. So this is a significant shift of how we do business. And so I just wanted to mention it once more here. And if there's any questions y'all have over that, or if we need to talk through that, I'm happy to do so.
Just real quick, I saw that Commissioner Janfight Miller, Vice Chair Miller, had her hand up. Christine, I don't know if you caught that or not.
Oh, I did not catch that.
Yeah.
Thanks for seeing that. Commissioner Miller, did you have something to say?
No, that was a mistake, but I'm here listening. I lowered it.
Well, welcome. I want to add a little bit to the option money going to the title company. In 6 months, I don't think anybody will ever remember it ever going to the seller. That's just, we just learned. I just thought the rule was imposed April the 1st, and we could not have picked a better date to impose it, since the Friday before that, I believe, was Good Friday. So it really got into that business day aspect of it. I think most people are adapting well. I think most title companies are adapting well. And so I think it was a good change. And it was a change that was vetted, thoroughly for probably well over a year with the broker lawyer, Texas Realtors, of course, the commission, Land and Title, Texas Land and Title. And, we had a lot of input in that. So hopefully everybody knows that. If you do not know it's changed, then you have not written a contract or presented anything since April 1st. So I hope that's not the case.
And Scott, we have a question here from Daniel who says, what happens if a buyer backs out of the contract and cancels the check before the check clears?
My initial response to that question is that the same thing that happened before April 1st. It's that is probably an issue that came up sometimes, even if the check was delivered to the seller, right, instead of to the title company. So it's delivered to a different hand, but what to do in that circumstance remains the same.
Agree. And it addresses, that would be failure to deposit the earnest money. And that is certainly, earnest money. And then looking through paragraph 5 and paragraph 18, it talks about good funds. So I think the contract answers that question as far as would they be in default according to paragraph 15. I'm not an attorney, but if you'll read the paragraph 5C, I think it gives you some insight.
Okay, I have another question or comment. Richard Week says, additional option fee going to the seller needs to be addressed.
Go ahead.
The amendment says buyer has delivered to seller. So additional option money does go to the seller the way the amendment's worded. I don't have the amendment in front of me, but it states it does go. Seller has received, or if somebody has an amendment, pull it up. It specifically states it goes to the seller, additional option money.
And I'm thinking, Richard, that you may be saying that that's a glitch that needs to be addressed. I may have that wrong, but if that is what you're saying, I do think there will be, well, I'll say it this way. The broker lawyer committee is meeting on June 4th. And they consider every comment that is submitted to them. And I fully expect that some of those comments will be things that license holders have experienced since these contract changes went into effect. Hey, this is a quirk. You need to change this thing. Just things we've figured out just from practicing in this new way. And so if that's what you're saying, then submit a comment and they read every single one and talk about them. That comment can be sent, I'm about to give you an email address, to general.counsel@trec.texas.gov. So general.counsel@trec.texas.gov.
Okay, Chelsea, thank you so much for that. I have another question and then a hand raised. So Linda Conway says, if option period needs to be extended, where is the additional fee delivered?
To the seller.
To the seller?
To the seller. Additional option fee.
Okay, and then
Okay.
I have a hand raised. Matthew, and Matthew, I'm going to totally ruin your last name. Thickle? Matthew? You need to take yourself off mute, Matthew, if you're talking and we're not hearing you. There you go.
Okay. My question is that option fee check, it is to be returned to the title company or to the seller? You said that the option fee check is to be delivered to the title company, but who is the pay in that?
I missed the last part of your question.
Who is the pay? You have to write the check, option fee check, to the title company or in the name of the seller.
Got it.
Got it?
The option fee will be made to the name of the escrow agent, which in Texas, the majority of the time it is the title company. Correct, Chelsea?
I trust you on that.
Yes. And on the amendment, it says number 6, buyer has paid seller an additional option fee of blank. So unless changes are made, additional option does go to the seller, and that's on the amendment box number 6. Hope that helps.
So earnest money. So I understand the earnest money and the option fee both are to be written in the name of the title company or the escrow, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's my understanding.
Thank you. But there should be 2 checks. Cannot be combined.
The contract allows for 2 checks or 1 check, either one.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's in paragraph 5.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Matthew, for your question. We have a couple of more comments on the side. I'll just make sure that everyone can see them. In 2020, there was significant discussion and within the committee meetings at TREC about reducing the number of education hours required to become a broker. Whatever became of this topic?
I would love, I wish we had more to say on this, but I'll say a few things, and I'm guessing our chair has a few things to say as well. The Broker Responsibility Working Group has been meeting since really the end of last summer or beginning of fall, and has come up with some very good recommendations on toggling those hours, those experience and education hours, in the way that you mentioned, Mike. And I want to say that this is the second time similar recommendations have been made by a Broker Responsibility Working Group. There was a Broker Responsibility Working Group that made recommendations before the last session. And because last session, meaning 2 years ago, January of 2019 through May of 2019, TREC was going through the sunset review process. Those recommendations from the working group prior to that session didn't go anywhere. And so fast forward to a new working group that made similar recommendations, reviewed everything uniquely. That did not make much progress in this current legislative session, primarily because of the uniqueness of this legislative session, COVID, really. And so I believe, and actually had a conversation with someone internally just yesterday, saying we've got to start that process immediately following this legislative session in June, to solidify those recommendations and to help move that process forward, so that the legislature can more fully consider those changes. And of course, the commissioners would be very involved in that. But I think there's a great groundswell of support to make those changes. The timing just has not been right the last 2 sessions for things having nothing to do with the content of those changes, just the circumstances. But I sense that the time will be right this coming session, this meaning January of 2023.
And Chelsea, we have a couple of comments on the side about concerns about reducing the requirements or diluting education. And I think, it's something to be important that this is a long process that's going to be reviewed, but also that I don't think that the recommendation is going to be, just disregard education in general, but that they're going to consider different alternate types of education or experience, correct? It's not just education.
There's always a tension, and it's a tension that's an important one, and I should probably just call it a balance, and that is Governor Abbott has really led a charge within Texas to make sure that there is no barriers to entry into, or unnecessary barriers to entry into any field of expertise. It's not just real estate. And so he has encouraged licensing agencies to review the requirements to get a license and to ensure that those requirements are not overly burdensome. So that's on one hand. And then you have an industry that where we get comments like this all the time. There's enough bad brokers or bad sales agents out there. We need to increase the education or increase the experience required to get that license in order to elevate the profession. You could say that a lot of different ways, but I think it's based on your interaction with one who doesn't seem to be as competent as you would like. And that's relevant. But the question is, how do you ensure that you have a well-qualified industry while keeping those barriers to a minimum? And so that is the balance that we're working to ensure. And there are a lot of different opinions on that within the industry, within the commission, within this agency, and we will work to make sure that whatever happens is transparent. The Broker Responsibility Working Group has really worked to toggle, not so much reduce the requirements, but to provide more opportunity. Say more experience can be substituted for lack of a college degree in order to get a broker's license. That's the one that comes to mind to me. Scott, do you want to say anything to this? It's a touchy subject.
Yeah, I think you hit it just right. It is a very controversial and touchy subject. Yet at the same time, I think Broker Responsibility has approached it from a very good standpoint that just because you have 900 hours of education does not mean you are going to be a good broker. And they're looking at experience, they're looking at education, they're looking at what education. And so I don't think the bar is going to be lowered as far as what it takes to be a broker, because I think there's more to it than education. And so, again, it will be a process, and whatever they do, we will certainly open up for comments and concerns and everything else. But they are looking at it, intently. They're not just throwing something out and making a decision without a lot of input from a lot of different, shareholders. There was just a comment about education for supervisors, and currently supervisors are required to take the broker responsibility 6 hours every year. So that's the extent of that right now. I want to go back one thing real quick. There's some chat going on. I just saw currently additional earnest money goes to the escrow agent and our title company. The contract address is escrow agent. Additional option goes to the seller. Okay. And I don't know who had it in the chat, but they had it spot on. I just want to make sure that there's no confusion on that. But broker responsibility is something we're very concerned with. And I promise you the working group is taking this extremely, extremely serious.
So we have about 15 minutes left in our hour, and we have one hand raised. So Mike, go ahead and unmute yourself so you can ask your question. And then shortly after that, we're going to move on to our next topic.
Yes. Yes. Hi. Thank you for answering the question regarding the education hours to become a broker. I believe it does have to require education hours and, of course, the experience level. The obstacle that a lot of agents are finding out here in the field is that as far as education hours, to accumulate that, you kind of hit a wall as to where you can accumulate a good amount of hours that are actually out there available. A lot of agents, like personally myself, are finding after years of experience, I'm having to go back to take principles 1, 2, and everything else just to accumulate hours, because there isn't sufficient content out there to cover the hours required. So from an agent perspective, right, am I just taking hours just to take hours, or am I taking hours to actually educate myself and help the public? Experience is great. I have that. The thing is the obstacle of finding, hours. If I keep taking 1 hour here and 3 hours there, it's going to take me like an eternity. So I appreciate the committee taking that into consideration. I know, as you mentioned, it is a very touchy subject. Us agents aren't out here requesting that it be reduced to 300 hours, by no means at all. We understand it's important to have that. It's just the pathway to get there, the content that is not available with new classes and topics. Thank you very much.
Mike, thank you for bringing that up. And again, broker responsibility is also working with ESAC, the Education Standards Advisory Committee. I'm licensed in New Mexico, and I take a class on lead-based paint and environmental issues and stuff like that. That's national. So, that is part of it, to find other classes that will count toward the education, because you're right. We do have people retaking Principles 1, Principles 2 contracts to get the hours. So that is something they're definitely looking at and working with ESAC simultaneously to get a solution.
Okay.
Okay,
and
that,
yeah.
I think we'll move to the just a quick legislative update. Some of these are more relevant to you than others. I'll go through them quickly. There are certainly more bills going through the legislative process than these, but these are the ones that we've been following very closely. The first, House Bill 1560, is the sunset bill for the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. They've been through the sunset review process this session, and so this is the bill that changes some of their functions, and it also transfers residential service companies, which TREC has jurisdiction over, to TDLR, Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. It would mean that we would no longer regulate residential service companies. So it looks like this bill is progressing substantially, and I would imagine that it would pass. Not entirely relevant to y'all, other than if you have a complaint you want to file with an RSC, that would then be handled by TDLR. Second bill, Senate Bill 1588 by Senator Hughes, there's also a House companion, but it looks like the Senate bill is the one that's moving. This bill creates the requirement of all HOAs to submit their business certificates to TREC. Currently, they have to submit those to the county clerk's office, I believe, but this would add the requirement to submit to TREC. It would, and then we would hold that information and be able to produce data around HOAs. It really would just create a central repository for HOA information. Senate Bill 713 is the sunset review scheduling bill, and that means that that bill outlines when all state agencies are scheduled for a sunset review. So the sunset review process is really the mechanism for the legislature to determine whether or not state agencies need to continue to exist. And that TREC went through that process 2 years ago. And in the bill that established that we would need to continue to exist, they established a sunset review for us for 6 years, even though the regular process occurs every 12. And so in this bill, Senate Bill 713, they bump our sunset review back to a 12-year process rather than the 6. All that means, in my humble interpretation, is that the legislature has more confidence in the work that we're doing than they did 2 years ago. And because we've implemented all of those recommendations by sunset, they feel good about where we are. They can hold off on reviewing us again. So that bill, by the way, none of these bills have gone to the governor's desk for signature. So they're pending. They may or may not get to the finish line, but we're watching that one closely and are quietly celebrating just that vote of confidence in the legislature. House Bill 1993 has a few changes to the seller's disclosure. And we are watching that. The broker lawyer committee will implement any changes to the seller's disclosure on our form, and that will mirror what the law says. But we're watching this bill to make sure that we know how to make those changes, of course. I think the main change on the seller disclosure, there's two of them. The one that comes to mind is related to disclosing a certain type of plumbing pipe that's used. House Bill 2998. Oh, no, did I miss one? Nope. Seller's disclosure 2998 by Smith. I'm going to mention this one quickly. It doesn't look like this one is going to pass. It has only a few more days to have a hearing on the Senate side. But this would change the requirement of certain business entities. Right now, if you have a business entity that receives a commission, it must be licensed by TREC. I'm going to say that one more time because that's something that a lot of people miss. If you're receiving a commission through a business entity like an LLC, it must be licensed by TREC. And this bill would remove that requirement for certain types of activities for a business entity. Essentially, if the only thing your business entity is doing is receiving a commission, then it would carve out the need for a license. Again, it doesn't look like this bill is going to pass, which would mean that you would continue to need a license for your business entity. But should it pass, it would have a pretty big impact on those who have those licenses. And then lastly, we have a few eminent domain bills, House Bill 448 and House Bill 2730. These bills are much bigger than TREC and relate to the eminent domain process. But what the way in which TREC is involved is it would require some education for our license holders who are easement or right-of-way agents, 16 hours of education that we would develop. And then it would also mention TREC in the landowner's Bill of Rights, basically informing landowners that there is a complaint process for easement of right-of-way agents that TREC oversees. Basically, we receive complaints against those license holder types, and it would mention that in the landowner Bill of Rights. We're watching these closely but it's a much larger oil and gas and landowner issue, but we're just a small little piece of that. Any questions related to those bills? Where can we find more information regarding specifics or these proposed bills? I will tell you that there are a lot of different places. If you simply want to wait and see what passes, then we will do an overview of what affects the industry over the course of the summer. I know Texas Realtors will do something similar. If you want to watch the progress of these bills, I encourage you to go to capital.texas.gov. Capital is spelled capitol.texas.gov. And there you can plug in these bill numbers and you can see where they are in the process. And you can sign up for updates. This is the website called Texas Legislature Online. It's capital.texas.gov. So scribble down these bill numbers and you can follow along with the process. The last day of session is Memorial Day, May 31st. We call it Sine Die. But as we get closer to Sine Die, many deadlines will cause some of these bills to die because they haven't made it through a certain part of the process. If you haven't gotten to committee by a certain day, if you haven't passed one house, then it dies, that sort of thing. I have a whole chart that tells me that. It gets pretty complicated. Any other questions?
Excellent job. For a session that wasn't going to have a lot going on, sure was a lot going on.
There was a lot going on.
All right, I think our next is questions and answers. And
that's right. I think our email addresses are on the next slide so that if you have any specific things you want to talk about, you know how to get a hold of us. We're really grateful that you would be with us this morning. Please tell all of your coworkers to join next time. I look forward to being in the field and meeting people in person. Having taken this position just 2 months before COVID hit, I haven't gotten around very much, but I'm grateful for these opportunities to just say hello and to engage. I learn every single time I do this. I hope the same is true for you.
I'd like to just ditto that. We certainly appreciate y'all logging in. We appreciate the questions. We appreciate the chat, and reach out to us. We'll do another one of these after the next commission meeting. I want to thank Christine for putting it together. And I guess any final questions or comments, we'll be glad to answer. We just have a couple minutes. If not,
I was also going to say that we typically try to do an article every month that focuses on a topic. So I highly recommend that you sign up for communications from the agency. You can do that on our website, or check out the newsletter that's sent to you every month. And in that, we'll have a bunch of hot topics or articles or notice of when you can comment on rules. So we really want to make sure that you're taking a look at that newsletter every month. We will do this after the next commission meeting as well. And okay, we've got a lot of thank yous coming through on the chat. So we had about 90 something people here today. So I'm really excited to have such great participation. I like that meme. Thank you. Okay, I don't think we have any other questions. And okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions, Scott and Chelsea. Scott and Chelsea, thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy days to come and talk to everyone today. I know that everyone's very grateful to have you. And if anyone has any other questions, the emails are still on the screen. Please feel free to send an email to Chelsea or Scott. And we'll see you guys next time.
All right. Thank y'all. Bye-bye.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone.